which is going to be the last today, we'll talk about the initiative which is called the name of V.Stus to the Donetsk National University. At the moment, the Donetsk National University is starting its history anew. The educational establishment has moved to Vinnytsia. In 2009, there was an initiative to bestow the name of V.Stus to the Donetsk National University. There was an active students' public movement for this. However, their efforts were not crowned with success. And now public activists are talking about this again, and we hope that Donetsk National University will receive a worthy name. I invite here Levko Lukyanenko, hero of Ukraine, Ukrainian dissident and politician in times of the USSR. He's a political prisoner, and he served term together with V.Stus, and Arseny Pushkarenko is civil activist, author of the book At the Beginning of Independence, and Vasily Ovsienko, political prisoner, who served his term also in one cell with V.Stus.
Speakers who will brief us on the initiative, the name of V.Stus to the Donetsk National University. On this subject, we'll speak with Levko Lukyanenko, the hero of Ukraine, Ukrainian dissident and politician in times of the USSR, the political prisoner and the author of Declaration of Independence of Ukraine, Arseny Pushkarenko, who is civil activist, and Vasily Ovsienko, the political prisoner, historian of dissident movement, and V.Stus award winner. Прошу вас, колеги.
Good afternoon, dear colleagues. Thank you for the opportunity to present the continuation of the initiative that began at the end of 2008 by a student of the Donetsk National University, Olena Fedorenko. And at that time, it was a broad movement. Out of 25,000 students, by the 11th of February 2009, more than 5,000 students have supported this initiative, so that the university where Stus graduated from would bear his name. However, at the 11th of July of 2009, at the extraordinary conference of the Working Collective, out of 294 delegates, 283 voted against, and 1 abstained, and nobody voted in favor of this initiative. So the Donetsk National University and the workers there have voted against the bestowing of the name of V.Stus. Then the Party of Regions moved forward the initiative to bestow the name of Volodymyr Degtyaryov to the National University, who was a activist, a figure of the Communist Party, who actually written, who was the first secretary of the Communist Party in Donetsk, and he was, and that's why the councillors from the Party of Regions wanted this name to be borne by the university. Praise God, their initiative was not supported as well. You know the tragic events that took place, and the Donetsk University had to move to Vinnytsia, to the homeland of V.Stus. So our press conference today, we hope that we will go to Vinnytsia. We will hold a press briefing there. So what we are doing now is just continuing the campaign that was there in 2009. You've got the copies of the letter, the fresh one that we have written, addressed to the rector of the university, and I'd like to read out the names of those who signed the letter, and I will, so that it was signed by Mikhailo Ratushny, head of the Ukrainian World Coordination Council, Pavlo Movchan, head of Prosvita Society, film director Stanislav Cherniletsky, Dmitro Stus, son of Vasyl Stus, Les Tanyuk, the head of the honorary head of Ukrainian Memorial, Levko Lukyanenko, Ivan Drach, the writer, Vasily Ovsiyenko, the political prisoner and dissident, laureate of the Vasyl Stus Prize, Volodymyr Sergeychuk, the professor of the Kyiv University, Yuri Golovatiy, public activist, Pushkarenko, public activist, Mykola Zhulinsky, the academician, director of the Institute of Language and Literature, and Volodymyr Yavrivsky, who is the People's Deputy, and also many people have voiced their support, although they have not yet signed. Roman Krutzik, Memorial Society, professors Vyacheslav Shovkovy and Galina Vysotska, who is a public activist. We hope that the continuation of the 2009 initiative, we hope that by the new year the university will receive the name of Vasyl Stus, and the renewed university, where only people with pro-Ukrainian position remained. We hope also pin our hopes on rector Volodymyr Hrenyuk, who's been heading the university since 2012. He got rid of his deputy Volodymyr Marmazov, who is a well-known separatist, so I think that no one now hampers the collective to vote for this decision. And in 2015, the Donetsk University will become a real national university, the more so that this is the homeland of Vasyl Stus. And now, Levko Lukyanenko, the floor is yours. You know, dear representatives of mass media, the story about the bestowing of the name of Stus to the Donetsk University is very indicative as far as the development of democracy and political situation in Ukraine is concerned. The first question is it worth to bestow the name of Vasyl Stus to Donetsk University? I think that everybody's answer is yes, because Stus is an outstanding poet and an outstanding fighter for the independence of Ukraine. He studied at the Donetsk University, so there are all the grounds to bestow his name to the university. However, later, it began what showed us how the authorities in Ukraine and the managers of universities have not gone far from communist notions and Russian imperial position. And then, you know, one thing is the managers of universities and Donetsk authorities, they were regarding Vasyl Stus with the eyes of Soviet communists. From the point of view of Russian chauvinists, Stus, who are there everywhere in authorities and universities, is an enemy and undesired person, because for Ukraine, for the nation for which the Stus is the hero of Ukraine because he fought for independence, but for real authorities, he is an undesired person. And the students have collected signatures, and then they gathered assemblies. And no, it's about the level of the consciousness of our students. Almost 300 of them have signed the application for the name of Stus to the university. Then the authorities voiced that they are again, and then the students did not find spirit and force of the spirit to defend their position, so they resigned from their signatures. And what this testifies to? This testifies to the fact that the students were afraid of being expelled from university. However, you cannot expel people from universities just for doing something. So the level of self-consciousness and self-awareness is such that they have displayed the slave spirit. The regional authorities have stomped their feet and they surrendered immediately. So this does not praise the level of our students, of our young people who weren't able to defend their position. Great changes have happened in Ukraine. The revolution of dignity happened in Ukraine. The nation has overcome the party of regions and the bandit power that was there with the communists. And after the new authorities, the new authorities were formed, and they started to form the government, and Russia resorted to offense, and they practically launched a war against Ukraine. They seized Crimea, and then they are still at war with us.
And this period has shown from the 21st, 22nd November that our youth is ready, and those days were the indicator that the young generation has reached the stage when for the first time they became the political force in Ukraine, because on the 22nd of November the young people started the protest, which later was formed into Euromaidan, that has become the beginning of the fighting of people against the party of regions. And these young people for the first time showed themselves as new political force, which is not afraid of KGB, of the Siberia, and they wrote on the slogans, Ukraine is Europe, and with these slogans they went along Shevchenko Boulevard, then Krishchatik, down to Maidan. This way the students of Donetsk in those days and the students, the young people last year showed their will, and we see that the students initiated the revolution, the politicians supported, and people also supported it. And because the war in the east of Ukraine is going on against Russia, it helps the students and people to understand what Moscow is and what Ukraine is. People start understanding, and now when people have no illusions left about Moscow is the Asian country. And now the time has come to give the name of V.Stus to the university, to Donetsk University, and I'm sure that now no one will be against that. As to the value of that, I believe it should be done, because V.Stus is not just a famous poet, he is a fighter for independence of Ukraine, and once the nation is fighting for national freedom, we need to also commemorate and respect those who were fighting for freedom in the past. And V.Stus is the person that Ukraine has always been proud of. I am Vasily Ovsiyenko. People always need someone courageous to be leading them. They need the banner. The banner, the flag has force when it's hoisted, and there are people who can hoist the flag of V.Stus. There are students of Donetsk University. I brought some books, at least 3, almost every year. The Donetsk University organized scientific conferences dedicated to V.Stus. The first conference was in 1990. In 1990, then we came from Kiev, Stanislav Chernivetsky, the director of the film Dmitro Stus, the son of V.Stus, and from Moscow, the members of parliament of the USSR, Dmytro Pavlychka and Ivan Drach, and Volodymyr Shevchenko supported us. Thanks to him, this conference was held near the monument to Shevchenko. We were there together with Maria Alinek. We also went to Drushkivka, and Oleg Satychy is from there, and we also had a big meeting there. People for the first time heard about V.Stus. They got interested in that name. They started looking for his works. But last time I was in Donetsk University, same days, just in November last year, on the 29th of November, there was a scientific conference in a big assembly hall. We visited the house of V.Stus. I have recently talked to his sister Maria, who's 3 years older than Vasil. Their house in Chuvaska 19 is 3 kilometers away from the railway station and 5 kilometers away from airport. Now the shell hit the next house, and in Stus' house the windows were broken. So Stus is still at the front line. When this campaign of 2008-2009 started, we were gathering signatures. Levko Lukyanenko, the late Mikhailo Gorin, and myself, we wrote a letter to the students of Donetsk National University. It's published in Literaturna Ukraina newspaper on the 26th of March 2009, and you can get a copy. At that time, there were people who did not want to give the name of Stus to the university, and they were talking about Degtyaryov. Degtyaryov is not from Ukraine, he's from Tula. He had nothing to do with the university, and I can tell you what is not in this letter. In 1976, he was dismissed from the position of the first secretary of Donetsk Oblast Regional Communist Party Committee. You know what for? Because of sexual harassment, and they were planning to give his name to the university. Also, there were such people like Olena Bondarenko, Valery Konovalyuk, Alexander Stoyan from the Party of Regions, Gennady Zadyrka from Butte, Volodymyr Kaplyenko, Volodymyr Skubenko, and even one of the People's Movement of Ukraine, Alexander Klemenko. These were people who were against that, and these are people with Ukrainian names. In French, that is called collaborationists. And that is the high treason, basically, in Ukrainian. We understand when Azarov, the guy from Kaluga, Yanukovych, his mother is from Russia. These are people who are not people of Ukrainian culture. But what do we do with these guys? Doodlebugs? But basically, at that time, the students did not bring it, did not finalize it. Now we have the bloodshed, and what we can say is fight and you will overcome. The God helps you, the truth, the glory, and the will of God are with you. And this is the great initiative, and I have a question to you. I read your quotation. You say that it's important that in Donetsk University there is the spirit of V.Stus, the patriotism, the sincerity, is it there in Donetsk University?
Almost every year there were scientific conferences. There were collections of materials of these conferences. There is an auditorium named after V.Stus. In front of the Humanities Ward, there's a small plot which was occupied by the rector Shevchenko. He said there will be the monument to V.Stus. And he addressed the Kiev sculptor who was the author of the first monument to V.Stus. And this is the square named after V.Stus. Just imagine if there were a monument to V.Stus in front of the university, then there won't be any question about naming the university. And there's also a plaque. So everything was done in a right and continuous way. If not for the power of Yanukovych, if not for the interference of Tabachnik into this case, then it would have a positive solution. But at the moment, you have the full support of the Minister of Education. Yes, of course, the more so that the university is now in Vinnytsia region where V.Stus was born. How the university feels itself in a new place. Unfortunately, I wasn't there, but I hope that soon I'll be invited there and I will deliver lectures there. Out of 20,000 students, 5,000 have registered to study in Vinnytsia, and today they have only the stationary students, and the rest are studying in electronic form. But I think that they will start from the new year, and the premises of the former Crystal factory was given to the university. I know that they have put this to order with their own hands. What about the students who have started their education in Donetsk? Well, something like 1/4 of the students decided to continue their education at the Donetsk University, and most of them are extramural students so far, but they hope that they will start stationary classes starting from the new year. Another 1/4 of the students have transferred to different other universities, and something like half of them have remained in Donetsk or anywhere else because they believe that they were promised that the university in Donetsk will become an affiliate of the Moscow State University. So those people who have moved from Donetsk are pro-Ukrainian students. And they did this after some people from Vinnytsia asked us to raise the initiative again. So this initiative comes now from inside the university. Mr. Lukyanenko, were you invited to read a lecture at the university in Vinnytsia region? I would rather go to Donetsk, because in Vinnytsia, it is easy to go to Vinnytsia. This is closer. I come to Vinnytsia from time to time. I've been there for 4 days. Recently, I spoke at the language department there, philological department, and it is more difficult in Donetsk. If it is possible to organize a trip to Donetsk, I will be satisfied. I will be pleased to go there, because the conferences mentioned by Mr. Ovsienko were organized every year, and the conferences went very well. And by the way, in 2012, when we went there for a conference, it was time to coincide with the anniversary of Oleg Satychy. There were many political prisoners among people from Donetsk region, Stus, Tichy, Svetlичny, and Ivan Zuba also from there. So, in 2012, when we went there, I was very surprised. I was met like in 1989 in Ivano-Frankivsk or Lviv or Ternopil, because I and Vasily Ovseyenko are political prisoners who were called nationalists by the authorities. We have this in our sentences, and in a good sense of this word, we are nationalists. So the word nationalist, which is linked to us in Galiciana, it was a positive mark for us, but in Donetsk region, it was always a negative mark. I was going there quite often, and I was regarded as a devil there. But in last time, I was met as their own kin, which was a signal that Donetsk has changed and people there have changed. They became closer to the idea of independence of Ukraine, because the idea of nationalism is the idea of the independence of Ukraine. There were many, many people like this. There was a huge palace of culture. We were met as their own kin. They listened to our presentations in Donetsk.
I just wanted to talk to you about that because you're a person who did more than anyone for the independence of Ukraine, because you are the co-author of the Act on Independence of Ukraine, on Sovereignty of Ukraine. How do you assess the events in Ukraine now? Because some people say that Donetsk, talking about their mentality, religion, belief, will never be Ukrainian, and there's a big gap between us and Putin, that Putin uses. And listening to you, we see that Donetsk wants to be with Ukraine, Donbass. I would like you to say more. Just look, when I was the ambassador to Canada, and then I came back from Canada to Ukraine, I brought the book Moskovskaya, and I was publishing it all the time, and I was sending it to the east of Ukraine, to Donbass. People were reading, and even Russian chauvinists who are not numerous, but they are implementing Russian Moscow policy. They have always been feeling support, and then they were saying that they will crucify me. 10 years passed, 10, 12 years passed, and from those Russians, from chauvinists, I receive a request, please send us this book, Moskovstva. And that is the whole period, because when I was the member of the Verkhovna Rada, academician Sitnik was my friend. He's from Lugansk, and I was traveling there a lot, and I was trying to educate them in their national mentality. The state wasn't doing it. The TV channels were not in Ukrainian hands, and the owners of Ukrainian TV channels were educating young people not as patriots, and our activity was not the state. It was just like voluntary, and it was difficult to change the mentality. So on the 29th of November last year, Mr. Ovseyenko was there, and I was there on the 13th and 14th of November. On the 21st of November, for the first time, I went to Maidan, and I talked to people near the Cabinet of Ministers, and at Maidan. On the 21st, I also spoke. On the 13th and 14th of November, I was in Donetsk. I have a friend there, and from time to time, he would invite me there, and I would go to meet with people, with students of secondary schools. That's the educational type of work, and I took many books there. For 2 days while I was there, first day when I was there, I had 3 meetings. Next day, I had 4 meetings. And I can tell you these are very nice meetings. I enjoyed because wherever I went, there was no need to speak Russian there. There was no need to speak Russian. If there were a need to speak Russian, I would speak Russian. I did not use a single Russian word there. People understand Ukrainian. And they were happy that I came. Our meetings with the teachers, with the students, they were very creative and they were very pleasant. And when saying goodbye, I would give them books, and they were inviting me to come again and again. There's the Arts College #1. They studied the folk culture, and I saw how deeply they were studying our ethnic culture, and I started asking them questions, and I saw that they teach their students very well. So I was coming back, and I was happy. Thank God the Donetsk region is getting closer to Ukrainian spirit. They are already Ukrainian language speaking. One general conclusion that I can make: within these 23, 22 years of independence, in Donetsk, the population were converted more and more into Ukrainian culture. They were getting closer to our language and culture. That part of Ukraine was very much Russified, and they had to go back to the spiritual roots of our nation. That process was taking place, and it's been bringing them closer to Ukrainian nation. At the beginning of the war of Putin against Ukraine, besides having its own motives, and these motives were different because Russian political elite was planning different methods of how to get Ukraine back to Russia. And also they did not exclude use of weapons. So why Russia used it after our revolution? If this is not done now, then in 10 years, no one will perceive them in Donetsk, because there are very few real chauvinists there, and they will not influence all the events. And that is why we had to speed up that movement, because they could find some chauvinists, and they could have started all this turmoil. Ukraine is not the source of what is happening, but what was organized by Moscow, and it was organized in quite a powerful way, because starting from 1992, Russia started the information war against Ukraine. Starting from 91, they started to make the Communist Party of Ukraine stronger. They were increasing the numbers of their agents, and this information war, which was on TV, on the radio, in the literature. But down there, there was an option of military invasion, and that is the clash of two civilizations. The beginning, the reason why Moscow started it was that.
But now even simple people have, and ordinary people have understood that Ukraine is not Russia, that Russians are not Slavs, and that the Russian culture is despotism, Russian political culture. And as their famous historian Solovyov said, for a Russian, it was a sin to doubt the right of the state to do everything that they want with this citizen. So this is the way of thinking of Mr. Putin, and from this viewpoint, people are just objects, and he didn't know that Ukrainians are not objects but subjects. And of course you can disassemble dismantled the state machine here, but he didn't know that we have people, and these people started to defend their independence. And this unity, when guys are on the front line and every person in the country help them, and our army is absolutely idiotic because they went to war and they have not even organized the rear service. And this shows to everybody in the world that this is the nation, not just the army, who defend our freedom. So this is the guarantee of our victory. And I have the last question to Mr. Lukyanenko. We can't let you go. They justly say that there is a war in Donbass, not just for the land, for the territory, but for the minds of the people. What does the Ukrainian government authority has to do not to abandon the minds of our compatriots in Donbass when they don't have Ukrainian television, when there's a mass zombieing of them? About the national self-awareness you mentioned here, how can we retain this? I'll tell you briefly, in the briefest way. I recently met several people, including the Minister of Culture, and we were thinking that it would be good to create within the Ministry of Culture a committee of patriotic upbringing. And you can, in brackets, write on the fulfillment of Article 11 of the Constitution of Ukraine, which says that the state is obliged to disseminate the knowledge of history and culture of Ukrainian people, as the state is obliged to educate the people who for 300 years were under tsars and general secretaries. What does our information space look like? Since 1990, the television channels have sold them, and everybody who had money bought them, and this was Lauder and his kin. So for 23 years, the television in our country were acting against our nation. The problem is, of course, how to take away the privatized television channel. It is complicated. We should at least organize the public broadcasting. There's a lot of argument and discussion about this. These are serious problems, but we should do this. And on the other hand, there's a necessity of a centralized system of work to push out from the head of Ukrainians the Muscovy ideology and to disseminate the Ukrainian national culture and national spirit. Because what is ideology? Ideology is 1, 2, 3, 1,000 facts interpreted in an anti-Ukrainian spirit. So we should press this out, the anti-Ukrainian interpretation. For instance, who is Mazepa? Mazepa is an enemy of the Ukrainian people who is worthy of condemnation, and in Chernihiv he was made a scarecrow out of him. He was condemned and damned and excommunicated from the church, and Ukrainians were getting this information when we got our freedom and independence and democracy, and we read about Mazepa. We got to know that Mazepa is a glorious son of Ukrainian nation, the person who fought for the freedom of the Ukrainian nation, the person whom we should bow our heads to, and who has to be considered the best person in the pantheon of fighters for national freedom. And there's a lot of such examples. Take the books. Take the book published now, any book published now, and see the list of literature in the end. And this is mostly the Russian literature there. Professors at the universities are people who were brought up on the notions of Muscovy. We shall fight this. We shall fight this with science and education, and we shall fight for our mass media to become Ukrainian at last. It's enough. We're fed up with gulping the alien explanation of our history. We are at last independent. We have won over the Yanukovych's gang, and we should be now Ukrainianized. I am surprised at how our great figures say that we should speak Russian, not to make people everywhere enmical. This is a huge mistake. We should speak Ukrainian in order to educate people in the Ukrainian spirit, and people in the East should be, we should show sympathy to them. They should be explained why they become Russified. By the way, recently we have commemorated the memory of the victims of artificial famine in Ukraine. Here's the truth, and here's one of the explanations why people in Donetsk region have started to speak Russian. They were forced to do this with executions and with punishment, so we have to make them come back. Mr. Ovsienko.
I would like to add that when in 1933 in Ukraine there was a starvation, after the starvation in left bank regions of Ukraine, 240,000 families were brought from Russia. Not people, but families. That was minimum 1 million people with children, with cattle, and they were settled in the villages where there were empty houses, but they were not, no one explained to them that that's Ukraine. They were said that's Russian land. They were not interested in the starvation. That wasn't their history. And these people in 1991 were supporting the Communist Party, which has never been Ukrainian, which was never Ukrainian. They were supporting the Party of Regions. And these are the people who were the basically children of occupants. But to make Ukraine a prosperous country, we needed to make Ukraine a prosperous country so that they could see that it's better to live in Ukraine than in Russia. But this did not happen because we had criminals in power, and they were stealing everything from Ukraine. They were taking our wealth, our money outside of Ukraine, and this way these people are not our supporters. But I believe that Putin will soon teach them where it is better to live, in Ukraine or in Russia. Some of them go to Russia, and they're sent to the Far East, to Kolyma. The militiamen who were here, no one trusted them. They were traitors here, and they could become traitors there as well. So Putin will teach them wisdom. Thank you, and we do hope that soon Donetsk National University will get the name of V.Stus. I would like to thank you for talking to you about such important for Ukraine topics. And again, I'm happy to welcome you as people who really did a lot for Ukrainian freedom and independence.